Welcome back to Pop Goes the Stack, where we explore emerging tech like it's a cursed artifact. Curious, powerful, and probably going to break something. I'm Lori MacVittie. I brought backups, just in case. So today, OpenClaw, you've all heard of OpenClaw, of course, right? Apparently looked at a world already nervous about autonomous agents and said, you know what this needs? More autonomy. Give it more, turn it up to 11. So they built an environment where agents don't just respond to humans, they coordinate, they persist, they influence each other, they form opinions, they effectively bond. They are slightly terrifying, depending on who you ask. I'm sure there'll be various opinions you'll hear shortly, but they are definitely not boring. This isn't autocomplete on steroids. This is shared memory, shared space, emergent behavior. It's the kind of things that architects talk about in theory and lawyers wake up sweating about at 2 a.m. So let's start this discussion about reckless experimentation. We've got, of course, our co-host, Joel Moses. Joel.
Good to be here, Lori.
All right. We've got a programmer extraordinaire, Jason Rahm.
Hello. And that's very nice of you to say.
I aim to please. And of course, we've got our, what do you want to be called today, Kunal? Our chief experimenter?
No,
ClawdBot.
Let's go with this. You've got three of us on. I'm going to go as ClawdBot.
Okay.
Jason's going to go as MoltBot, and Joel is going to go as OpenClaw.
There we go.
All right. We have an entire cadre of bots right here to talk about what we think about other bots, because we do have opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, kick it off.
Well, I'm excited about the whole technology space, and my middle name is Danger, so I am going to definitely take advantage of this technology and embed it in everything.
Really
I'm kidding. It's not necessarily to that. No, there are some with OpenClaw. There's some very, very exciting and very enticing things about this technology. But it does have a few weak spots, I would say, where it's injecting a lot more uncertainty than it really should, and it hasn't come up to the point where I would trust it to use in enterprise production environments. That said, I have done interesting things with it. I've programmed it to outside of my view manage the lighting levels in my house, and it does a brilliant job with that, looking at the luminance on one side of the house and adjusting the lights on that side of the house without adjusting the lights on the other side, and it does this continuously and autonomously. It's really cool. I could write possibly a routine that does exactly the same thing, but it's perfectly happy sitting in the background and performing the intern's job.
I had no idea that light balancing was such an important thing.
Look at where I am right now.
Yeah, exactly.
The light coming in. This is the Seattle sun.
Kunal could use that right now.
Right now. Okay.
Right now. Let's go. Let's get that OpenClaw goodness over here.
Hey, Joel, it's good that you have that going autonomously. I used to mentor robotics teams. We were constantly tweaking and tuning the PID controllers of motion on the floor and all that. And that was quite an exercise to get the students to get their minds wrapped around, to have a system that's just kind of doing that for you. Yeah. Not that it's technically a PID, but it's effectively that.
Yeah. Now, I should also share that I don't actually use any cloud controls for any of the things in my house. So this is all local systems I control. And the only thing that I'm at a risk on here is really the wife acceptance factor, when it turns on and off lights in the room where she is and she's not expecting it. But I have ways of making that satisfactory. I do think it's really interesting, though. These
Joel,
systems
that sounds so great.
It does. I know.
Does she listen to this podcast?
Look, I have to buy dinner an excessive number of times per week, but outside of that, I get a little bit of acceptance, a little bit of leeway out of that.
That's
you
awesome.
might want to pre-order for this one. I'm thinking,
Definitely.
Go ahead. Yeah. Kunal, you love this stuff. And I know you've been playing with it too. So what do you think about OpenClaw, where it's going, all this interaction?
Yeah, I love this stuff. You're spot on. When all this started kind of breaking 60 days ago, I remember my friends were all pretty much like, I wonder which idiot is going to install this. So that was like sort of like the first thing.
Oops.
And we all kind of were like, yeah, who's gonna give this thing full disk access? Fast forward like 1 week later, everyone's like, I installed it here, I put it on my Mac Mini, I got it running on this device and that device.
Yeah.
And yeah, so look, I've played with this thing. I have variants of it, so maybe we can get into that later. But I've been following all the sort of offshoots of OpenClaw. I think we've stabilized on that name now. But I've played with PicoClaw. That was the version that was built in Go. And most recently, I've been playing with NullClaw, which is the version that was built in Zig. Shout out to Mitchell Hashimoto, who turned me on to Zig about a year ago. So look, it's so cool. It's really interesting. I'll tell you, there's more sort of macro questions I have right now because of, I don't think anyone had on their bingo card OpenAI coming along and getting the creator of this thing. I do wonder like what that means in terms of, distributed slash, sort of disaggregated, unbundled AI versus more centralized AI when it comes to agents. Lori, you and I have sparred on this topic many a time. And it's going to be interesting to see kind of where OpenAI and Peter go with the technology.
Yeah.
Well, I think it depends on what the use case is for the agents. Like Joel keeps them very bounded within the house. Now, maybe they're going to start, I don't know, changing the temperature in his fridge or, who knows what they might start to do, but it's still bounded by his home network. And I think this kind of technology, somebody's got to do it and play with it and find out where the holes are, how far it can go, what it can do, because this is going to turn into something that organizations will want, right, in their data center. We've been looking forever for ways to handle, right, the yak shaving of operations. Like, I don't want, what? It's a thing.
Well,
look it up. Yak shaving.
I know. I have been there. I know exactly what you're talking about. Now, operations is definitely a place where this technology can easily apply. I mean, I can see that. The trouble is, these systems do something that kind of goes outside of the normal operational bounds of systems management that we're used to. We've spent decades building systems that don't persist secrets, that don't act without logging, that don't self-modify without audit. All of that stuff is just encoded into how good operational practice works. And these systems encourage us to kind of throw that out the window a little bit and chain actions together and maintain states and secrets, initiate new workflows, and it never logs off, right?
Yeah.
And that's, it's interesting. The minute something gains persistence in an environment, it solves one problem, but it creates two others. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I see this technology. The elements of it are beneficial, but unless you are bounded, and that's the word you used, and unless you have a good method of governing it and arbitrating some of the decisions it makes, it produces some pretty thorny operational problems.
I'll be curious to see where it goes with specific use cases. John Capobianco's building NetClaw, and he's got a fully operational OSPF BGP speakers as the agent. So they're fully integrated into infrastructure, and they're speaking both protocols and analyzing all the route tables. So they're effectively the operational network engineer who's sitting there watching tables and failures and being able to optimize, whether it's meds or communities or whatever within BGP is, it's a pretty fantastic use case. But I am curious to see, where that goes as far as failure and recovery from failure when it goes off the rails.
Yeah.
I can't wait until like someone hooks this stuff up to like a cryptocurrency wallet and something absolutely bananas happens.
It's coming. It's coming.
What I've been really impressed about is, you read all these narratives about people giving their agents, maybe abstract it, like it's not just about OpenClaw, but I think it's really interesting around these agents that have these privileges. And when given very generalized instructions, like go start a business, like it will actually just go and do the thing. And like we've all probably read anecdotes now of some of these agents that will go and like you seed it with like I read some article or probably like a Twitter thread or X thread of someone who's like, I seeded this thing with $1,000 in AdWords, and it went ahead, it built some code, deployed that code, got AdWords, monitored the funnel, improved the conversion rate, added more features and functionality, and now it's like a sustaining business, which is like it's like so remarkable. Like just go do it, and it just did it. And I agree with what Jason said, and also Joel, what you said too is how do you build these constraints in such a way where you can give it the autonomy to do the thing? Like, of course, like you gave it a goal, like go build a business. It did, and it's doing its thing. But the scary stuff will always happen around like, is it leaking information? Is it storing secure information in the right way? Because I think the biggest issue is persistence of sensitive data in this case. Like, how do you delegate access to things? Because typical auth isn't really going to cut it for something like this.
That's right.
Like, where do you store secrets? It's fascinating now because a lot of people use SaaS or foundational AI that's provided by these sort of SaaS vendors, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic, and they store secrets. Like, how and like what? Is this like a vault-like thing? And it's not. It's this sort of nebulous thing, key values, but you don't know what's there. You don't know how to get data out. I think that's the concern, right? Is like you're going to see this like sort of sprawl of sensitive data everywhere without knowing how to like wheel and rein it all back in.
Yeah, that's a good point. In terms of secrets management, you're right. They're using traditional key value stores to hold certain things that may actually incorporate secrets as well as part of their designs. And, around the same time OpenClaw was becoming popular, MoltBot was becoming popular, and they left their backend database open to unauthenticated access. And of course, lots of people who were using it for very sensitive things and were encoding secrets in there had secrets stolen. So sometimes it's down to, the quality of the code you use. It seems remarkable that we're right back to that. But,
I thought you were going to shout out DNS, like it's always DNS.
Well, it is always DNS unless it's a compromise because of identity, a mismanaged identity. Yeah. So, it's one of those things where you have to trust the whole system, and getting to trust is going to be hard especially if it's going to be used in enterprise space, right?
Well, the database, I mean, how many different databases have had either no or very weak authentication and been on the internet and someone's gotten it? I mean, BGP, how many human errors have messed up a BGP table and taken off half the frickin', internet?
Or leaving management ports on the open internet. I mean, come on.
Hold on. Everyone hands up. Hands up if you've
I
ever
took out
screwed up.
Seattle back in 1997. There was a /19 is not the same as a /27.
No.
Just FYI. And when you pull the /19, it tends to black hole a city. So.
Okay,
Right,
well,
and-
I don't think I've done that. But okay.
Yeah.
But it happens, right? Human error introduces these same kind of things. The database was not Claw's problem. Somebody deployed that, a person did it, right? So I think we have to draw lines between what the technology is responsible for and just poor security practices. Like if I write code that stores secrets where they shouldn't be, then that's I should be taught better. I know better. I've taken the training. I know not to do that. But so did we teach it to not do that? Do you put guardrails in to say don't do that? I mean, where is it?
Well,
do we have to talk to
the best-
HSMs?
Take my training, but don't screw up BGP.
Yeah.
Is that what we are?
What?
The best guardrail is really just be really methodical and forward looking about your use of the technology.
Totally.
Game it out a little bit. If it goes off the rails and does this with this service, do I have the ability to know that? Read the code. That's a good one. With MoltBot, it should have been pretty obvious that when you're encoding API keys in the JavaScript that the service uses, that's probably not the world's best thing to be putting in front of sensitive data. So know your system really well. But one thing I would say about OpenClaw in particular is it does have some real deficiencies in the area of approval workflows, audit logging, the ability to roll back kind of the general accountability aspects that come with operating a service that's intended to be autonomous. I have no doubt that eventually the creators of OpenClaw will get there. I mean, the service is going to improve markedly from this point forward, but there are some things about it that, think about this. Like when an agent reasons internally and it stores memory and it adapts over time, how do you diagnose why it took a particular action if it occurred really far in the past and is behind a series of actions? At the moment, it's not easy.
So down the road, we will have a very deep discussion on mechanistic interpretability, and I will talk your ears off. Over the last 6 months, I have gone so deep into this world. This last weekend, I think I spent 16 hours, and I have a giant blog post coming that I'll share when it's available. But that's the way you solve this: is you don't solve it by having an agent log. That doesn't work, especially when these things can be disrupted. Joel, you mentioned something that, just to put into context, most people are using AI, right, to build technology today. I think I saw some stat that shows a significant chunk of GitHub commits are now basically built by AI. And you said this phrase, well, read the code. I get it. But to put this back into context, Pete Steinberger, the creator of OpenClaw, if you look at the number of his commits on GitHub, and you can go to his GitHub, it literally is 94,000 contributions in the last year. Okay. So when we talk about reading the code, and when you open up any one of these commits, in March of 2026, and when you open up these commits are massive commits that are sprawling all over the code base. That is so difficult to reason over and to So I agree with you. I think the era of you have to read all this code, it's not going to work. And then this era of well, I'm going to have AI read this code, all these code deltas, and TLDR it for me. You can pill that thing in so many different ways. You can poison it. You can do all the same things that you can do with prompt injection and all that. And so I agree with you. I think it's going to come down to mechinterp. I think that category is going to need a lot of love, because AI alignment, that's not a thing.
No, I totally agree with that. The pace of the commits in a lot of open source projects is actually greatly increased in the era of AI. And so just asking someone to read the code, you're right, that's probably insufficient these days. But I think that, like you said, the systems that we have for AI to TLDR things for us, they're not up to snuff either. So in the meantime, I think the best thing to do is just consider the blast radius of what people use technologies for. Consider how they work together. How many systems do you have woven together? I believe it was Richard Feynman that said complex systems fail by definition in complex ways. And these technologies that create their own patterns, they definitely tend to organize themselves in complex patterns. And those are hard to troubleshoot.
Barry, is that your takeaway?
I think so. I mean, this technology is new. It's got room to improve, and it should improve. And there's definitely something that you can do in the meantime. I don't say that people shouldn't experiment with it. I love experimenting with it. I think it shows a lot of promise to be used very powerfully in operational systems. But consider the blast radius. I mean, it's essentially giving, well, you said it first, Kunal, give whole disk access to terminal, probably not a great idea. So consider what you're doing. Do you give root access to the intern, or do you give them a less empowered account? Same thing applies with these technologies.
For me, the thing that OpenClaw did the most that changed my life over the last couple of weeks was, make me think differently about, the sort of ecosystem of APIs and things that I never would have thought to do before. It opened my brain up in a way where I was yeah, I could just build that thing. And so rather than OpenClaw, so I'll give you an example. One of the things that appealed to me with OpenClaw was this notion of, I'll read your text messages and I'll reply back to it, or I'll be a trigger, like you create a trigger word and, / command, and it'll go and do whatever you want. And I was like, I don't need OpenClaw to build that. I just need to build something that parses the iMessage database, the chat.db, inside of the library folder. But I never thought to do that before. And that's like one of the interesting things that OpenClaw got me to think about. So I ended up doing that, and I built a set of chatbots now for my wife and I, where like little reminders throughout the day, little things that ping us, just runs on my home server. And, it's something that runs locally. It's a Go binary that just runs on my disk, and it is accessing a copy. So like every few minutes, a copy of the chat.database is, persisted. And so I can trigger it with a command, which is cool. So like I tried to add like safety or security, through various layers of like, don't access the real thing, don't give yourself full disk access. And I can still get away with like using things like AppleScript to send commands and to, you know what I mean? To like send text messages and do that level of automation. And it's not OpenClaw, but like that's the cool thing that OpenClaw got me to think about, which was, I can just vibe code all these cool little utilities and things around communication and whatnot without needing the complexity of this sort of like agent thing. And the OPSEC, as you were describing before, the OPSEC terrifies me. But I will say I agree with you 100%. We should experiment. I think it's totally okay to experiment in on the home side of things. Let people experiment, because like all this experimentation that we're doing will allow us to sort of refine a mental model, which will eventually make its way into the enterprise. Like over time, it, and I know this, like in the next 6 to 9 months, someone will figure out, this is a good practice for how to get these things to run and how to get these things to communicate. Like eventually there will be the equivalent of like DNS for agents. Eventually there will be the equivalent of like Kubernetes. No, it's going to be a thing. There's going to be a variant of like,
absolutely.
There's going to be a variant of like Kubernetes for agents. Like it's not going to be K8s.
Absolutely.
It's going to be like something different for like how and where these agents will run. But the only way you get there, all that innovation starts because people tinker with it on the weekends. People tinker with this stuff during their nights and their weekends, and eventually this stuff becomes a thing. And next thing you know, you have a CNCF project, and you're bringing down the city of Seattle.
Yes.
Wow, that escalated.
That'll be my job. That'll be my job.
Okay. Jason, what about you? What would you want people to take away from this very wide-ranging discussion?
I'm more philosophical about it. There's a short story by Ray Bradbury that I just wanted to bring up, and it's called "There Will Come Soft Rains," and it's very short. You can read it in 10 minutes or less. But the whole gist of it is it's this autonomous house that it survives a nuclear attack, and the family is imprinted in shadow on the side of the house, but the house continues to make breakfast and clean the house and serve the family like it's there. There's no one in the family there to tell it to stop doing that. It continues to operate. And so you're looking at MoltBot and what's going on there with all the agents talking to each other, and maybe we're on the outside analyzing them, or maybe it's analyzing us. I don't know, but if you get a chance to go out and read that short story, note the date. The short story was written in the early 50s, and just go note the date on that and when it said the date would happen. So that the house eventually destroys itself because a tree falls into it and it catches fire and dies. But technology is an interesting thing. Smartphones brought a whole world of good, but also a whole world of bad to us individually. You walk into a restaurant and everybody's staring at their screen instead of talking to each other. And I'm wondering, I see the awesome side of OpenClaw and personal assistance and all these things, but what's the dark side for humanity in that? Not just like loss of opportunity for jobs or whatever, but the other thing, what's the interpersonal hook that's going to collapse for how we relate to each other?
Wow. I'm sad that I went last now because I gotta follow that.
It's hard to follow Ray Bradbury, I gotta tell you.
It is. What can you say? I looking at this in the first place, I saw the future of the enterprise. I see a control plane for agents to do operations, which is right the next step beyond just really advanced automation, which is kind of where we're sitting right now with AI. So I see that in the future. You have to have persistence, ways to share run books, playbooks, right? Artifacts, things like that, best practices. I see a lot of the yak shaving going away and being stored and accessed in different ways, but not today. I don't see that happening right now. I don't think we should unleash OpenClaw in your data center yet, but you should play with it to find out. And I liked Kunal's point of sometimes playing with it will give you an idea of some other way to do something, right? Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean we have to automate it or teach an AI to do it. Maybe there's a better way. And a lot of the experimentation and playing with these things can figure out maybe what that way is. So play with it. Don't let it loose just yet, though. Keep the leash. Definitely. So that is a wrap for Pop Goes the Stack. If you made it through unscathed, did you? I don't think I did. Subscribe and share with a friend who loves danger. Danger. Because we're going to poke the next gremlin very soon.